good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for giving up an hour tonight to learn more about our long-range planning process. I am Lisa Ramey, and I have the pleasure of serving as superintendent for our district. And along with me tonight, I have our Associate Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. Carol Seid. I have our Associate Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Michelle Leddington, our Chief Financial Officer, Paul Bobeck, and our Director of School Community Relations, Lane Mendenhall-Buck. So again, thank you for being here tonight. Just to remind you, tonight is really an informational session, hoping to give you an overview of the work that's been done over the last month and a half. There will be a link that's sent out tomorrow so that you can provide feedback to us as we continue to work through this process. Also, I will say this again at the end, just as a reminder, Monday night, February 22nd, our board workshop will revolve around our long-range planning process and will be live streamed as well. So if you are interested to tune in again on Monday, please feel free to do so. So tonight, what we're going to share with you is we are going to talk at a high level around the long-range planning process, the what, the why, and the how. I'll go through details with you about the budget reduction packages that we have tonight, and then again, remind you how you'll be able to access a survey so that you can provide us feedback. So first, we want to start with that, really understanding the why and the how, and I am going to turn this over to our Chief Financial Officer, Paul Bobeck, to get us started.
Thank you, Lisa, and good evening, everyone. As Lisa just mentioned, let's start with trying to look at the district's entire financial picture on one piece of paper, and that's what we're trying to do with this graph and this illustration. School districts are governmental bodies. We operate with fund accounting. And that's what we've reflected here. These are the various funds we have, a little over 10 different funds. Another concept that is unique and very critical to understanding is Iowa schools operate under a concept called Dillon's Rule. Iowa Supreme Court Chief Justice in the late 1800s came down with this ruling, and it still determines how school districts operate today. Basically, Dillon's Rule says school districts have only the power and the authority to do that which is expressly stated in the Iowa Code or necessarily implied. And necessarily implied has a very, very limited application. So that is in contrast to how cities and counties operate, which is under home rule, meaning they can do anything they would like to do as long as there is not a law or other restriction that prohibits them. So school districts and cities and counties operate under two different very concepts of how we operate and what limits our powers and authorities. If we take a look at all of these funds, and again, governmental accounting rules apply, and we have to account for our transactions in various funds. The Iowa Department of Education prescribes which funds account for which transactions. If we were to start off and think of each fund as a separate checkbook with a unique source of revenue, again, that Dillon's Rule concept that it tells us where revenues need to be deposited. And then also each of those funds or checkbooks can only pay for certain types of expenses. And again, that's governed by Iowa Code. If we start kind of to the right and work our way to the left, we have some proprietary fund types. Our insurance for health insurance and dental insurance is processed through a fund known as an internal service fund. And our enterprise funds, as the title implies, charge fees to our users. They're designed to be self-supporting. And those two funds that we have are our school nutrition, the breakfast and lunch program, as well as our community education fund, primarily operating our Kids West before and after school care. In the pandemic, those funds have seen some very difficult times because our users and the fees that they're able to charge have been down significantly. There is really no state aid and no property taxes that are going into those funds to keep them going like our other funds during the pandemic. That brings us to the rest of the funds that are known as governmental fund types. The significance of those 5 funds that have green highlights, those are the funds that can legally levy a property tax rate. Our debt service fund, as the title implies, pays the principal and the interest on our bonded indebtedness. We do have bonds outstanding issued against our sales tax revenue and our voted PEPL. The sources of those revenues are expenditures out of the PEPL fund and the sales tax fund, and then we pay the paying agent who distributes money to the bondholders. The next fund we have is known as our physical plant and equipment levy, or otherwise known as our PEPL fund. It is entirely financed through property tax levies, and it is the physical plant and equipment levy fund that is paying for equipment as well as our buildings projects. Recently, last summer, early fall, our board approved our next 10-year capital improvement plan that is being financed with our physical plant and equipment levy as well as our sales tax fund. And that is our next fund under capital projects. It's entirely financed through the local option 1% statewide sales tax. And again, it can only be spent on capital projects, much like the PEPL fund. What is unique about some of our expenditures are some funds that take place or can be spent, say, out of the general fund, can also be paid for out of either sales tax or our PEPL fund. So, for example, we do have non-instructional technologies expenditures that we've typically paid for out of the general fund. The Iowa Code, Dillon's Rule, gives us the authority to consider having those paid for out of the PEPL fund or the sales tax fund as well. Say a cost shifting strategy, and we have employed that. Similarly, equipment breakdown that would typically take place and expenditures for those equipment repairs are generally paid for out of the general fund. But there is a bona fide insurance product that is offered. And as you can see, the management fund can pay for insurance programs, not health insurance. And we're able to purchase a equipment breakdown insurance product that basically will pay for the repairs of equipment, certain types of repairs. That too is another cost shifting strategy that we have employed to try to take some pressures off of the general fund. Student activity fund in the middle there, kind of like the name implies, that accounts for revenues from football, basketball admissions, or student clubs and student dues, and it can only be spent to support those co-curricular or extracurricular activities. We also have a public education and recreation levy known as the Pearl Fund. It is financed entirely with property taxes, and we do participate at the statutory maximum of 13.5 cents on the property tax rate. And again, it is can be spent on recreation places within the district as well as our playgrounds. Our management fund and financed entirely with property taxes. And again, as the Iowa Code requires, we can only use those management fund monies to pay for our property and liability insurance, unemployment benefits. And here's where we pay for our early retirement benefits as well, which leaves us the general fund. And that is the fund we're going to spend the rest of this evening focusing on. And it is the single largest fund. The numbers at the bottom there illustrate that for the most recent fiscal year, we spent, I believe, about $114 million, a little over 60% of all of the district's expenditures take place in the general fund. And that is largely where most of all of the employees are paid for. And it is the general fund that we are having the greatest financial pressures on right now, and bring us to this evening and the effort of needing to make our budget reductions. Lisa, if you, next slide, please. Thank you. What we have here, again, is focusing on the general fund. We have the fund balance in governmental accounting. That would be much like our corporate equivalent to retained earnings. And we also have this concept of unspent balance. It is measured in dollars, but it is not real money, but it is what the Department of Education uses to determine whether school districts are operating lawfully under Iowa code. As you can see, over the course of time, I think we have our last 15 years illustrated here. We do run in cycles. And some years we increase our reserves, and some years we decrease our reserves. And if you note the last 3 fiscal years, year in 2019 and 18, that blue line, that unspent balance, we have been living off of our reserves for each of the last 3 consecutive years. We have been deficit spending. Yes, we do have reserves that have allowed us to operate this way, but this is not a sustainable long-term solution. And that is why we are where we are today in terms of needing to make reductions in our general fund so that our expenditures more closely align with the annual revenues. So this kind of tells us where we've been. Sorry, Lisa. And where are we going, which will be the next slide. Iowa schools are funded on a per pupil basis. And again, October 1st of every year is a very critical date for us, as that is the date that every district in the state of Iowa counts the number of students we have. And that is the number of students that finances the following fiscal year. So if we look to the far right, October of 2020, October 1, 2020, we took our official enrollment, and that will finance and fund the 21-22 school year, our upcoming budget year. What does this picture illustrate and tell us? We have something called the official enrollment, and that's what the Department of Education and Department of Management use to finance the school districts. But we also have served enrollment. That counts and looks at the number of students that are actually within our buildings. How can they be different? Largely, the difference is when we look at official enrollment, we count our resident students, regardless of where our resident students are attending, whether they're in our buildings or if they've open enrolled out. Served takes into consideration open enrolled in students and those open enrolled out. So if we look at October of 2012, our official enrollment was greater than the students we were actually serving in our buildings. Really what that means is we had more open enrolled out students than we had open enrolled in. That trend appeared to break even in about October of 2017, where we served slightly more than our official enrollment. And from a financial perspective, that's a good thing. Open enrolled in students bring with them revenues, just like a resident student would. And even if you look at October 19, we're increasing the number of served students. So we really have more students open enrolling in than open enrolling out. But please take a note at October of 20. Look at that blue line. That is our official enrollment. That was our open enrollment during the COVID period. And we had a significant decrease in the number of students enrolled in the district. We did see a decrease from the previous year of about 170 students, and that is pretty significant. And that's what's going to drive our funding in the general fund for next year, the 21-22 school year. We did also see our served enrollments continue to increase. It dropped from the prior year, but we still have more open enrolled ins than we have open enrolled outs. Next slide, please. The second element of financing schools is what's known as state supplemental aid. Previously, it was known as allowable growth. And what we have here is a reflection of the allowable growth as well as the state supplemental amount since the funding formula was put in place back in the 1970s. The item of note is if we look at the last 10 to 11 years, far right-hand part of this graph, I believe about 5 years out of the last 11, the growth rate, the amount of revenue that each student generates has been 2% or less. And this was through the current year, and I believe the Iowa legislature did reach agreement last night on 2.4% for a state supplemental amount. That is just waiting for the governor's signature to be signed into law, and then we will know what that element of our budget is for next year. Lisa, next slide, please. What we also do when we share the certified budget with the board is we take a look at our neighboring school districts' property tax rates. And as you can see, West Des Moines has one of the lowest property tax rates here in the metro area. And when we take a look at the property tax rates, please remember that first slide we looked at that had those 5 green highlighted funds, that is the cumulative total of all of those funds that levy a property tax rate. It's $13.16. We've heard through this process that some folks have suggested that they're very strong supporters of Iowa schools, our schools here in West Des Moines. And since we have one of the lowest property tax rates, why don't you just go ahead and raise our taxes? We support education as an effort to thwart and eliminate the need to make budget reductions. Unfortunately, that's not an option for us in Iowa. We are currently participating at the statutory maximums of all property tax levies that exist within the general fund that generate spending authority for us. So that was just another element that we need to make folks aware of, is even though we have a very low property tax rate, we do not have the room to increase the tax rate in an effort to reduce or eliminate the need to make our budget reductions. Next slide, please. Lisa.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. And so just to really sum up what you just heard Paul share, is there's 3 reasons why we are looking to make reductions within our general fund budget. It's the deficit spending over the last 3 years. It's the enrollment changes that we're seeing, as well as low state supplemental aid for many years. So now I want to move to really how and the process that we use to get to the 3 packages that we'll present to you tonight. So at any time that we are looking at reducing budget, we step back first and say, what is a good process that we can use? And typically processes that we've used in previous budget reduction times don't seem to be a process that collectively people would want us to use again. So Paul and I did some research to see what have been processes that have worked well in other communities across the state of Iowa. And so the process that we use this time, just as that some of our colleagues across the state use this process. So we felt like it was a really good process after learning about it, and thought we would use this process here in West Des Moines. So how this process starts is the superintendency team that you see here tonight. We sit down and we start looking at our entire general fund budget and looking line item by line item. And we identify each line item in the budget as a core, a categorical, and if it doesn't fall in one of those 2 buckets, then it's considered an additional. Once we determine what amount of money we need to reduce from the budget, then that's when we start looking at those additional items and putting those in budget packages for reduction. Now, let me share with you the different definitions about what really a core, a categorical, and then additional means. So for a core package, for a line item to fit into a core package, that means that it's something that Iowa code requires of schools. So that's basically chapter 12. It tells us what we need to teach preschool through 12th grade. Also, we looked at anything that in our board policies or rules and regs that identified the maximum class sizes per grade level or discipline at the secondary level. Also looking at minimizing the impact for us to be able to manage our school district. And for the district our size, we need to make sure that what is that minimum requirement for us to be able to function. And then of course, maintaining our facilities. We know that we want to have safe and clean facilities for teaching and learning. And so what is that minimum that we need for that upkeep and that preventative maintenance? Those items then were identified as core as we worked through our line item. Then when you think about categorical, it's something that's state, federal, or local revenues that are specific for expenditures. what people I think need to understand is, yes, you saw Paul talk about the various different funds that we have based on governmental accounting for schools, but also even within the general fund, there are very specific categoricals that can only be spent on specific items. For example, preschool. There's a funding mechanism for preschool that those dollars are within the general fund but can only be used for preschool. Homeschool assistance program, our talented and gifted program, just to name a few. And then if a line item did not fit into a core definition or a categorical definition, then we identified that as an additional item in our line items. And that's something that, you know, we've had probably in some cases for a long time. Some might be fairly new. And they are definitely something that we have put in place over years that we value. But as anytime we have to make budget reductions, it really, that's the challenging part for us. Where in our system can we make those reductions so that we can live within the revenues that are coming? So we felt like that additional piece is where we needed to start. So then once we shared with our Board of Education in December the projections, the next 5-year projections, and determined that we did need to continue moving down the path of making budget reductions. In West Des Moines, we have a long, strong tradition of including people and hearing voices throughout the process. So we put together a long-range planning committee, and that committee consisted of parents, students, teachers, administrators, and community members. Approximately 60 members started. We did ask out of the 4 night meetings that you must attend 3 out of 4. So as the process worked through in the last month and a half, we did see some members drop off due to busy schedules and not being able to make that commitment of those 3 meetings. I think we ended up with around 51, 52 that was able to complete all 4 meetings. Those folks, their voices were heard, input was put together. They needed to put packages together and help provide feedback to us for reductions that would total between that 2.5 and 3.5 million. And really helping us understand and asking good questions so that when superintendency goes to work, putting together the final package for the Board of Education to present on March 8th, that we heard those voices from that committee to determine what makes sense to move forward. Then how did that process work? So our very first meeting, we went through some historical information for our committee so they could really understand the why behind the work. And then we started out presenting to them 4 budget reduction packages that the superintendency put together, really going through and explaining the rationale behind each item on the package, and then asking them that evening to let us know if they supported any or all of those or none of those packages. Then as we worked through that process, we took that large group and broke them into smaller groups within the large committee, and they worked to determine individual packages that their group could support. And so we started with 4, reduced 2 of those, added 10 more. So then we had 12 total budget reduction packages with varying items on. One of the requirements is if you took something off, you had to add something back on. Didn't have to be the exact same dollar amount, but you had to come up between that 2.5 and 3.5 million. Then that very last committee meeting that we had, we went through a forced choice activity where we asked each committee member individually to go through and vote on each package against each other. So the final 3 that we will share with you tonight were the top 3 vote getters through that forced choice activity. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and switch over to the packages. So bear with me just a moment. All right. Team, give me a thumbs up that you can see the packages. All right, perfect. Okay, so tonight what I'm going to do now is walk through these really line by line. So hopefully to give you a good understanding so that when you get the survey link, you really feel like you have an understanding of what's on the page for you. So we have the position. We then just have a description of each of those positions. We talk about what happens if it's eliminated, and then I'll show you if it's in each package or how many packages it is in. So we're going to start first. We've organized this by, you can see administrator and each of the departments, so you can see where the position or item is being, what department is being impacted. So this first line item that we have here is administrator, looking at a reduction of half-time Walnut Creek campus principal, as well as a half-time Valley associate principal, to equal a total 1.0 reduction in our administrative team. This would take place, for the 21-22 school year, and we'd look at having a shared position between Valley High School and Walnut Creek campus. If this position goes forward being reduced, we see that that shared position really could be a bridge between Valley High School and Walnut Creek, as we would have that administrator spending time in both buildings. We do know that there are other administrative duties that may have to be shifted from those current administrators to other administrators. You can see that this line item was in 2 of the 3 packages that moved forward from our committee. I should also share, before I go on to the next line item, is that what people often wonder is how, if there are people, since our budget is about 82% people, salary and benefits, if people, if we reduce positions that people hold now, what happens? We do have a situation this year where we have a large early retirement group leaving, and so we have several positions that will remain open. So we'll be able to provide opportunities for people, or possibly some of these savings can be done through attrition, where somebody is taking advantage of that early retirement and we wouldn't need to replace that position. So one of 2 ways. So the next item is another administrative position. It's our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. It's a full-time position. This individual coaches and supports our 13 building principals, evaluations, has other items like security and so forth that he's in charge of. If that position is eliminated, those duties don't go away. We would have to look at our administrative team and where would we move those duties to, possibly multiple different administrators to be able to handle that additional duties. That line item is currently in all 3 budget reduction packages. Then we move on to our community education department. The first line item is the administrative assistant position. That position serves as a support to our director of community education, and really the entire department. Does accounting, payroll, purchasing, provides customer service, etc. for our patrons. And then if eliminated, again, we would have to look at those duties shifting among others within the department. And currently that position is in package number 2 only of the 3 packages. Then we go to another community education position, which is our facilities use assistant, full-time position. This person assists our facility use coordinator in all of the facility rental processes, as well as reservations for our district activities. So it's not only our community users, but also all of the internal users. We have lots going on within our buildings each day. And if eliminated, these duties would need to continue, shift to another employee within community education, possibly look at if there's technology that could be useful as well. And currently that is in all three budget packages. Our community education project manager full-time position, this position provides communication and promotion for all of our community education programs that take place. If eliminated, the work would need to be reallocated either among others in the community education department, our school community relations department, and or the possibility of outsourcing if need be. That position is in all three packages at this time. All right, the next line 7 there, community education / district-wide intercultural outreach coordinator. This position coordinates services and provides opportunities for our immigrant and refugee students and families. It's been a real valuable service for our families. If eliminated, we see that those services possibly may need to be adjusted, looking at where else we can provide that service. There is some collaboration with our director of ESOL programming, so we would have to look at that, or if there are pieces that might have to be eliminated. Currently, that position is in one of the three packages. All right, now moving more, these items are district-wide. So the first one is a 0.5% across the board non-personnel cut. What that means is each one of our departments, buildings, all have a budget to help support the work that needs to be done in each of those departments. So this line item is adding an additional 0.5% reduction. And if eliminated, each of our buildings and our departments would just need to look at what they're, how they're charging different expenses to their budgets, and then determine where those cuts would be made and determine what they're not going to purchase. The reason why, and this is in one of the three packages, and the reason why you see at the beginning here, it says an additional to 1.0, is at the very beginning in one of the packages, the district-wide, we proposed a 1.0 across the board non-personnel cut, so a reduction of all of our budgets by 1%. So when you put these two together, it'd be a 1.5% reduction of all budgets across the district, building as well as district. And you can see that the 1% is a reduction of $230,000 across all of the different budgets we have. And we had proposed initially that in all three budget packages. Then we go to district-wide gifted and talented teachers. So as I said earlier, we have within the general fund some categoricals, and gifted and talented is one of those. And so we get a specific amount of money to run that program. As we've really dug into our budget, we see that we are spending more money than the revenue that comes in. So that is why you see that we are proposing a reduction of 2 FTE full-time equivalent out of the 10 FTE that we currently have. These positions work with our students who are identified, gifted and talented, and also I would say work with our teachers to help support teachers. What can they do to support gifted and talented students within that general ed classroom? So if eliminated, we would have to look district-wide to see how we take the remaining staff in that entire program and adjust staffing so that we are meeting the needs of the students that we have across our system. And currently that item is in all three packages, but I do want to note for you the difference in the third package is at $70,000. So one of the groups proposed a 1.0 reduction versus a 2.0 reduction. Okay, moving on, another district-wide position. We have our own print shop, and so we currently have 2 FTE. We outsource one and one of our own. This is a reduction, a proposed reduction of the head printer. That's our a district employee, and we would remain with the contract employee. So that means that we'd have just one person doing the print, overseeing our print shop in the district. So if this position was eliminated, we might have to have all of our employees who send print jobs, maybe think about sending those earlier, because turnaround times might be a little bit longer than they are currently. And that reduction is in all three budget packages. Then in line 12, we have the district-wide, it's maximum use of flexible account. So, and in parentheses there, we have homeschool assistance program and teacher quality. So a few years ago, about 3 years ago, the legislature passed a law that allowed us to look at some of those categoricals, very specific categoricals within the general fund. And once we have, at the end of a year, we have carryover dollars. And once we know that we have sufficed all of the programming that needs to happen for those specific programs, we can then take a resolution to our Board of Education and identify other general fund expenses that then those carryover funds can be transferred to this flexible account and used for those specific items. So if this line item continues to move forward, we would just be, again, maximizing the use of those carryover funds that we have in those identified, that we're able to by law identify those carryover funds and transfer those to the flexible account to be used for expenses in the general fund. And that we set as at a tune of $150,000 and did end up in all three packages. Then another district-wide is the network system administrator. This individual manages network and all the functions related to our network security. And if eliminated, those duties aren't going to go away either. We'd have to either contract those duties out or, we do have 2 FTE. See if we could move to that work being done by just the 1 FTE in that area, which could mean a delay in some of that technical support. That position is in one of the 3 budget packages. Then we look at line 14, which is also a district-wide, and it's reducing the general fund contingency. So currently we have a board policy that requires, as our business office is setting up all the various line items that we have, it requires the business office to set aside 0.5% of total general fund dollar expenses for unforeseen expenses that may come up within any given school year. If we would eliminate this, that would reduce the available funding for unexpected expenses that come up throughout the year. And I'm going to ask Paul to just share specifics about it. What that 0.5%, it equals 400,000, and you can see it's in all 3 packages, but to get an idea of what typically is set aside. So Mr. Bobek, do you want to add to that?
Certainly. Under our existing board policy, very round numbers, we are currently budgeting about $600,000 for contingency in the general fund. We have looked at how much we have actually spent of that contingency amount in each of the last 2 years, and it is nowhere near that $600,000 level. So we have proposed reducing that contingency amount, taking the dollar amount from $600,000 down to $200,000, or that $400,000 reduction, and believe that based upon our last 2 years experiences, leaving a contingency of $200,000 would be sufficient going forward.
Thank you, Paul. All right, so that sums up the district-wide proposed reductions. Now we'll go to the elementary school area, and we have one item there, and that is a proposal to reduce our foreign language, so our FLES program at that 4th through 6th grade level. This is our Spanish grades 4 through 6 district-wide. We do students in 4 through 6 have 60 minutes a week for each of those grade levels. So if eliminated, then what that means is our Spanish opportunities would begin in 7th grade, and students could continue that Spanish learning through high school. This is a reduction that's been proposed and still remains in all 3 budget packages. Then we move on to the operations department. Within our system, we currently have a position, maintenance support technician. This position oversees the security of our badges and doors and cameras throughout the district. If eliminated, we continue to need to have the badges and the security that we have, so the duties would have to shift to another employee within that same department, and that budget reduction is in all 3 budget packages currently. Another operations proposal is to outsource our custodial department. And what I want you to see here is this proposal, if it goes through and is approved, would be effective July 1 of 2022, not July 1 of 2021. And the reason being is we really have to go through an RFP, a request for proposal process, and that there just isn't the adequate time between the time that budget reduction proposals will be approved and implementation. But what this is outsourcing that business practice. So looking to hire an outside company to come in and perform those duties that we have currently being performed by our own employees. So this is usually an idea that is a cost-cutting measure that school districts or entities use as they look at reducing costs. If eliminated, again, we'd still have the need to have our buildings clean and safe learning environments. So we would need that duties, all those duties to be performed, and we would look at hiring a third-party company to do so. That item has made 2 out of the 3 budget reduction packages today. And we look at, again, in operations, it's outsourced the maintenance department. We do believe that much smaller department, fewer employees, we could make that happen by July 1 of this year. That again is using that idea of outsourcing, so a third party coming in and to perform those duties. So if eliminated, those duties would continue to be needs, and so we would have the outsourced department do those duties for us, and that proposal is in all 3 budget packages. Another operations proposal is the regional custodial supervisor. So currently our district, we've divided up into 3 different regions, and we have a supervisor for each of those regions. This proposal, and I believe the next one, so I'll kind of talk about these together. The first one is to reduce 2 of the 3. The second proposal there is to reduce all 3 of them. These positions really lead and direct our building head custodians. They assist our director of operations with all of the supervisory responsibilities and evaluations of our custodial staff in those buildings. If eliminated, we have to reassign those duties of supervision, evaluation to another administrator in the operations area. The reduction of 2 out of 3 is in package 3. The reduction of all 3 is in package 1. All right, so now moving on to our secondary, and that in our system, secondary can range from anything grades 7 through 12. So this first one is a reduction of English language arts instructor at the 9-12 level. So at Valley or Valley Southwoods, it would be 1 English teacher reduction. If eliminated, we'd look at the student enrollment and determine there may be a decrease in the number of courses that we could offer, even possible that staff members with appropriate certifications, we'd have to look system-wide based on our contract, and there could be shifting and reassignment of staff to make sure that we are meeting our students' needs in grades 7 through 12. That budget reduction item is in package one only of the 3 packages. Then we have another secondary, it's reduction of extracurricular and co-curricular stipends. And again, I'm going to talk about these next 2 together because they're really the same. So we had initially proposed that we'd look at all the different extracurricular and coaching stipends that we have. And it's not that we're reducing any specific extracurricular, it's what we're looking at how many coaches we have based on the number of students we have or athletes that we have. So we would reduce that across the board 7 through 12 by $20,000. If eliminated, that's where our activities director would have to go through and determine where it makes the most sense based on the student enrollment in sports. That was a $20,000 item. The first one was in all 3 packages. Then when you get down to the second one, there was a group that proposed an additional $20,000. So a total of a reduction of $40,000 in those extracurricular or coaching stipends. So then I'll go to, again, we're still at the secondary, study hall supervisor. So again, Valley and Valley Southwoods, looking at reducing 2 of the 8 FTE that we have supervising students during study hall time. If eliminated, duties would shift to other staff. Even some student schedules may be adjusted if there were no open study hall periods. But with this reduction, we still have 6 FTE that could monitor study hall. So we believe that we could continue to be able to monitor those study hall with the 6 FTE. So again, the total cost of that you can see, and it's in all 3 packages. Then we are still at secondary, and Valley High School department chairs, eliminate that period off. So out of an 8-period day, our department chairs teach 5 of 8 periods. In that 1 period that they have off to do department chair work, they work on scheduling, ordering materials for the department. They have weekly, I believe it is, meetings with administration. This, if eliminated, they would be teaching 6 out of 8, and those duties would be shifted and or shared. And that budget reduction item is in all 3 packages. Another secondary item is at Valley High School, they have Math Center. So the proposal is to eliminate Math Center. Math Center is an open period where our math teachers have really students aren't assigned. Students can drop in for additional math support if they need it, driven by what they're wanting to do. If this would be eliminated, students could still receive support from their math teacher during encore time. We also still have math resource at Valley so that students could go during that time to get support. That budget reduction item is in all 3 packages. Then we look at another secondary, it's Valley High School Field Experience Coordinator. It's a half-time position currently. This position coordinates student projects with local businesses, really wanting that kind of internship or micro internship professional experience. We really believe in this work. So while this position would be eliminated, we do believe that having these opportunities are still really important. So how could we integrate those opportunities into classroom time and or through partnerships with our local chambers? And this budget reduction item is currently in all 3 budget packages. Another secondary at Valley High School looking at PE. So reducing 11th, 12th grade PE only by 1 FTE. Iowa code allows students who participate, there's very specific guidelines around this, but who participate in athletics could waive a semester of PE during their junior or senior year. So we would be following that specific guidance and allowing that waiver to happen during those times when students are involved in athletics. If eliminated, then we would allow that where juniors could waive that. We would have to change policy as well. Currently in policy requires that 4 years of PE. So we believe if we implemented this, we'd have a reduction in the number of students taking PE based on the number of students that we have out for our different athletics that we offer. You can see that this is budget reduction item is in package 2 and package 3. Next, we have in our agreement with our teacher association, we have many different stipend positions. And so one here being proposed to being reduced is the Valley High School Spotlight Assistant. Spotlight is the newspaper. And so this is the assistant, the adult who's the assistant there. If eliminated, those duties would have to shift to another staff member who already is supporting students with that newspaper. That item is in package 1 of the 3 packages. Then we have Valley High School Writing Lab Advisor. This is an individual who supports students in writing development. Again, I'm not assigned to this individual, but if I had a writing assignment and wanted some support, I could connect with this individual for that support. If eliminated, we'd have to have those students really going to their language arts teachers for that support, either before or after school during planning time or use of encore time. And that stipend position is in package 1 of the 3 packages. Then we have another secondary, it's Walnut Creek campus. It reduces PACE caseworker. It's 1 FTE out of 3. We currently contract these employees out. We have 3 of those that are contracted employees to support our students at Walnut Creek campus. This proposal would have 2 remaining. And if eliminated that 1 position, then those other 2 caseworkers would be working with our student population there at Walnut Creek campus. That budget reduction item is in all 3 packages, 1 through 3. Yes, and I did believe that that was the total. So just wanted to show you our long-range planning committee. When you think that we gave them that charge of $2.5 million to $3.5 million, they really did a nice job, even through that forced choice activity, to end up with 3 budget packages that really have that range from the low in package 3 of that 2.6 to the high in package 1 of almost 3.4 million, and then that middle of the road there, right at 3 million. So I thought that the committee did a really nice job. We had great discussion and worked well together. So I need to adjust, stop sharing here. All right, so see, it's 7:25, so we're almost there. So as I said at the beginning, tonight was really about providing information for all of you who attended. We have recorded this session and will post the recording of this session, as well as the link to the survey to provide feedback to us tomorrow. We also have a Spanish version of the recording, as well as the PDF of the 3 packages and of the survey to support those families who need the Spanish version. So again, tomorrow you will receive this information to start giving us feedback. If you're interested, Monday night, February 22nd at 5:15 p.m., we will be live streaming. Basically, I will be going through the same information with our Board of Education and looking for feedback from them. After Monday night, then our superintendency team starts digging into the feedback. We've received some feedback already through email. There were some people who came to the last board meeting to provide feedback. We really want to hear the feedback through the survey that we'll be sending out and posting tomorrow, so that we can then put a final budget reduction package together to take to our board at the March 8th board meeting for approval. Before I let you go, I just want to see from my colleagues, is there anything that I forgot to share with our community here tonight? Okay, I'm seeing head and nose. Okay, so I just want to thank all of you for attending tonight. I want to encourage every one of you to fill out that survey so that you can give us feedback. We are going to ask you to see if you support one or all of those 3 packages. I understand that you may say, hey, I could support this, but not this. We're also going to have a short answer space for you to give us some feedback that way. So you can say, I support package 1, but then in the short answer say, but I don't really like this piece in package 1. That will be just fine for us. That's the type of feedback we need to have as we are thoughtful and going forward. So 7:27, we did it within our hour as we stated. I wasn't sure that would happen, but I want to thank you for attending, and please feel free to join us again Monday at 5:15 p.m. Have a good evening, everyone.